So this video in particular will be a little bit different. There's not really a set order to anything here. I'm just going to be giving my overall thoughts on the latest rebirths in the Japanese version of the game, and obviously these will come out in the global version in a few months or so. So that being said, hope you enjoyed, subscribe, all that other good stuff, excuse me. So we're going to start off with the Goku. As you see here, he is a rainbow leader. He kind of was already anyway. He's just one of those really old school rainbow leaders that basically, I believe he was just all types 25%. That used to be like the best leader skill in the game way back. Yeah, see, that used to be the best leader skill in the game. Just shows you the creep of the game, right? So basically they gave him HP and attack and defense plus 50%. That's interesting because that still shows the creep of the game, because after that they made those guys that had 25%, they turned that into 30% all types, and then they made like 20% HP and attack, and then it's like now they're at a point where they're like 50% all stats. No key, just all stats. So it's pretty interesting because that's a very viable leader skill depending on if you run support units or not. But anyways, moving on. Supreme damage now. He used to have extreme. He still has the high chance to stun, which I believe equates to 50% for this guy. On most units, high chance is 50% unless you're General Blue. That being said, he does have a better passive now. He has 10,000 attack and 5,000 defense when over 50%. He used to be at when over 80%, I believe. Let's check it out. Yeah, 3,000 when above 80%. That's really bad. They were, obviously at the time this guy came out, they were really trying to make sure that he did not wind up being too good. You can see it. They gave him that leader skill. It's like, okay, this is one of the best leader skills in the game. Fine. We'll give you extreme. We're going to give you a high chance to stun, but we're also going to give you this really bad restriction. Honestly, that means 1-2 shots, 1 or 2 shots, he's below the restriction. So most of the time his passive just generally wouldn't activate. He did have a good link set, to be honest. He had Super Saiyan, he had Golden Warrior, and Prepare for Battle, which are all very common links for Saiyan characters. Saiyan Warrior race is kind of on the fringe because that's kind of getting phased out a little bit. Okay, looking at him now, he is kind of what I expected. He didn't really have much room for potential growth. He does have Supreme. I'm not going to take that away from him. As I did say, he has a better leader skill. It's just honestly the passive. I just don't like the passives that give you a flat boost. They're just not that viable. It'll always be the passives that give you the percentage-based increases that basically are the better ones because of the dupe system. Basically implementing the dupe ability skill tree, whatever that thing you want to call it, man, implementing that into the game, into these characters, means that obviously these passives get shafted, and most notably characters like Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken, for example, he gets really shafted because when you increase the character's base statistics for like attack, defense, HP, whatever, and then you apply, okay, well, I have, this Goku, for example. I have him on the team. Say, for example, his passive was 70% up instead of 10,000 attack. Okay, great. So he has these stats. We give him 120 for whatever the physical leader is, and then we have a friend that gives him another 120, and then we give him 70% on top of that as opposed to this flat 10,000. Generally, that 70%, due to the way that it stacks, would be a bigger increase, so you have more room for growth, and obviously you factor in the fact that you are going to be increasing your units in the dupe system. That doesn't mean that you'd prioritize this unit over somebody else. I'm just throwing out stuff. So the more you increase his attack stat, the more the percentages work in his favor as opposed to this flat one. He kind of stagnates. So that kind of is where this guy is. He doesn't get a whole lot better, to be honest. He does have Supreme. He is farmable because he's Super Saiyan Goku. Every version of Super Saiyan Goku in the game is farmable, so that's good. I don't think that he's an optimal physical unit yet. I do think that there will be a slot for him whenever the hero physical units come out. So basically like a super type, just like the Super Saiyan 4s are. I think there'll be a slot for him there. But if you're mixing in heroes and villains onto like a Broly-led team, for example, it gets kind of hard to find a slot for him because you just generally don't need him. You can kind of come down to a couple different factors and probably sub him in here or there depending on the stage you're on. All in all, really solid card. And like I was saying, these guys are just me talking about them. No particular order list. This is the best. This is the worst. Nothing like that. We're going to talk about another guy, though, that does have the same kind of treatment via the passive, and that is Evil Boo. So Evil Boo actually gets a lot better. He gets a lot better, actually. A lot of these guys do get a lot better, but I think one of the more notable jumps is on this guy because he used to be really bad. Now he's not as bad. So let me go ahead and say that he has all 3 key and HP and attack, so no defense, plus 30% to tech, intelligence, and STR types. He does get a raise on the attack for 3 rounds, which is pretty solid. He has Supreme. It's a Kamehameha attack. He is when 99% or below, which is actually a really, really good restriction. He gets 18,000. So off the bat, 18,000. While it's one of the highest, flat boosts in the game, period, it still is a flat boost nonetheless, which means that it does hinder his potential ability moving forward as you start factoring in increasing leader skills. Because that's the thing, the better the leaders get in the game, the more this is the shaft. And this works for everybody like this. The higher that increase gets on the leader, the one where it was like Super Vegeta, 70%, now Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta is 120%. That means more of a shaft to these guys. They just get worse in comparison to units that have the percentage-based increases. Now, I'm not going to really hark on that too much. I don't want to make that sound like it's a horrible, death sentence type of thing, because it's not. Now, Evil Boo, I'm not really going to shaft him here. I want to kind of make sure that people understand this. STR, right, is very hero heavy. Villain STR is kind of dry. You look at Rildo, you look at Omega, you look at Cell, you look at L or Frieza, which is by no means a really weak lineup of guys. But then you kind of fall off from there. And what I mean by this is this guy can honestly viably slide into that 4th or 5th slot there, it's especially depending on what you have, because you may not have everything. So he really can reliably slide in there and actually work pretty well. STR Extreme, they rely a lot more on shocking speed, which he unfortunately doesn't have. But then you stretch off to Fear and Faith, which Cell doesn't have and this Boo doesn't have. So there's not really a lot going on here for STR Extreme. It all depends on what the leader comes out with, because the leader could come out with, shocking speed and Fear and Faith and start to tie off some of those loose ends there, because even Frieza doesn't have shocking speed. This guy doesn't have that. Omega and Cell do, but moving on from there, Nightmare, which this guy actually have, is universal. Is universal across all those units. So, and also Kamehameha with Cell, and Cell is a little bit of a different case because STR Cell does super early at 10 key, which honestly has saved his butt several times, because if he didn't do that, he would be nowhere near as good as he is, even though he's a unit that does get overlooked, I'd say. All in all, Evil Boo gets a lot better, can be a viable option. The raise for 3 rounds, I don't know if that equates to 50% or 30%. Generally, it's a 50% increase. I can see that being something, and not just for him, all the units that do that, because there are a bunch of guys that have effects like that on their super tech. I can see that being something that becomes really, really viable going forward in the game as you start to add more health bars onto the bosses, because we've already seen information leak that eventually there will be 10 health bars on a boss. And obviously right now you kind of run through these bosses before these raises can really take effect too much. Like, you may get 1 or 2 supers in, but you're not really taking full advantage of it. So that is generally a 50% increase. So you factor that on top of the leader skill, the passive, and his base stat of 8,700, which isn't really that bad. It's nothing to snuff at. He can be really solid. I just want to kind of make sure that people understand that. By no means is he a horrible unit. By no means is he a great unit. He's just really average, and he got a really big increase. Let's look at how he was before, though. He got a really big increase. 99% or below, 2,500 Supreme, no stack. They added key to this and HP. It was already attack. And his link sets don't change very much. He just gets the rebirth link. Now, I want to talk about 99% or below really quick. Basically, passives activate at the start of the turn. So this goes for every type of restriction. Units, people say like, oh, well, Buhan will help you stay above this restriction or things like that, so you can run this with Buhan. But no. For example, if something says when you're at 50% or above, they get the passive. Okay, you're below 50% at the start of the turn, their passive didn't activate. So even if Buhan heals in that turn, it still isn't going to activate. So the inverse, right? It is borderline impossible to not get this passive unless he spawns the very first fight of the very first match, or you take the turn away from the enemy with a Ghost Usher or something. You are going to get hit one time. This is basically the closest to a guaranteed passive you can get, because 99% is that big of a number, and it is borderline impossible not to lose 1% of HP in a turn, and if you start off the match with him there where you're at 100%, you haven't had a chance to get hit yet, obviously it won't activate that turn. I'm just going to say that. But after that, it'll always be active. Even if you Senzu Bean, it'll have already had the chance to activate. So you know, it is what it is. That's really good restriction. If you're going to give him one, that's basically the best you can give him. All right, another unit that has a restriction. This one is kind of the same thing. 80% isn't that bad. It's a lot easier to be below 99 than it is 80, but 80 isn't that bad of a number. It's pretty easy to manage 80% too. Because honestly, bosses nowadays hit you 3 or 4 times. Even if those are normal attacks, you should generally get below that, unless you're running a whole bunch of tanks like Vegeta and AGL Frieza and whatever, Rildo, whatever you're doing, Omega, whatever you're doing, you're going to get below 80%. So he gives 3 key, HP and attack, no defense, supreme damage, 90% attack and defense increases. That is ridiculous because 90% flat out attack is one of the highest buffs in the game. 90% defense is damn near like the second or third highest buff in the game, period, too. So that is, this guy's really good. Like, I can see this guy being, like, honestly optimal AGL, because the thing about AGL is that you look at 5 units and then that last slot is like, okay, well, what am I going to put here? I can put this Vegeta there. I can put Super Saiyan 2 GT Goku there. I can put Super Saiyan God Goku there. You could put the Rebirth Gohan there, who gets shafted a lot because he doesn't have Prepare for Battle, but it honestly doesn't matter that much. You could put a Raleigh there. I'm going to tell you something interesting, too. It all depends on what you have. You know, that's something that people need to understand when we do these videos talking about these units. Not just myself, but my collaborators, my friends like Alex and things like that. People need to understand that when we do these videos, we talk about them, these units from a perspective of unbiased, right? Where it's like, it's not assuming that you have every unit in the game because everybody's situation is different. It's just you're looking at this unit amongst all the other possible units. So I'm going to tell you something a little bit different. This guy is interesting. He has a Revival link. Revival is really, really interesting because let's take a look at it here. Revival and Rebirth are on this guy. And Revival allows this guy to basically link with Frieza and a Raleigh for 2 key, right? It's interesting in and of itself because Arale is one of the best AGL units, or at least really was. I don't really use her that much anymore. Frieza comes and goes because depending on the defensive value. He has Prepare for Battle, which is good, allows him to link with his Saiyan brethren. He has Shattering the Limit, which allows him to link with Arale again, allows him to link with that Gohan, allows him to link with Beerus, who's really good. I'm not talking about the tournament Rebirth guys. I'm not talking about them here, but that Beerus is really good. This Kaioken Goku's solid. This Gohan, 90% up. That Goku. So, like, you can honestly throw this guy into a lot of different scenarios. Vegeta's really good, has a really good link set, and he got a massive upgrade. Let's check out how he was before. 40%, 40%. Extreme damage. No Prepare for Battle. He was really bad. 6,000 attack. Jeez, he was really bad. It's not really his fault. It's just he came out at a time where 40% was really significant. It really was. And now his base attack now, I believe, gets up to 8,000, pretty much 7,900, not bad. And his HP is almost 10,000, 5,000 defense. He's basically going to be a really hard-hitting tank. He's going to be one of the harder hitters on your team and a really solid tank. He does have supreme damage. He's not farmable, unfortunately, because he's Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta. Super Saiyan 1 Vegeta is farmable via the STR Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta stage. He's Super Saiyan 2, unfortunately, but still going to hit really hard. Cooler is honestly probably my favorite unit in this group. I could swear this is IC Cardados art. It looks just like IC Cardados art. I don't know in particular, but it looks just like it. Cooler, honestly, is one of my favorite units here. I recently pulled him. I had never owned Cooler ever prior to this, but Cooler has a Rainbow Leader skill, 3 key HP attack and defense to all types, 20% up, supreme damage, and greatly lowers defense, which I don't believe he did that before. He has extreme type allies plus 2 key and attack plus 30%. So he's basically like Rose. He is giving off key to the allies. Unfortunately, 30% isn't that big of a buff, but what can you do? It's one of the best supporting buffs. He buffs all of his allies and himself up by 30%, so that's cool. He's not going to hit really, really hard, but he's going to hit hard enough. He also has really good links. They added Shocking Speed on here, which I felt like he should have had in the first place, but now we're at a stage in the game where they're giving Shocking Speed to everybody, right? So you have Shocking Speed, Nightmare, Thirst for Conquest, which is interesting, Fear and Faith, and then Rebirth, of course. The other links are kind of just there. Thirst for Conquest is really, really interesting because it allows him to run on villains with LR Frieza for 15%. It allows him to run on intelligence or villains, whatever you choose, with Baby and Turles. It allows him to link with this King Piccolo, who got a Rebirth recently. He's really solid too. So this is a sneaky good link for these guys. Sneaky, sneaky, sneaky good link. So all in all, Cooler, honestly, is, I don't want to say that, but he is probably one of the best of these cards, period. Just, if not the best Rebirth, because he also has a key multiplier of 140, which I believe is the highest that we've seen so far. Supreme damage, greatly lowers defense, rainbow leader skill, extreme type allies, 2 key, and 30%. Not really anything wrong with Cooler. Nothing really bad about him. Really solid unit overall. Fits into a lot of different teams, and he's a nice supporting unit, even though there's a restriction in that it has to be an extreme type ally, meaning a villain. And let's look how he was before. 2 key, rainbow leader, okay. 25%, okay. Supreme damage, no greatly lowering. He did not have the shocking speed or the rebirth link. So Cooler got a really big buff. Now the last guy we're talking about is Nuova Shenron. Nuova Shenron. Let's see how Nuova was before. Tech type, HP and defense 60%. Raises attack for 3 turns. When he's facing one enemy, he gets 2 key and 70% more attack. And he had 8,006 attack stat, basically, or base attack. Nova was always really good in my opinion. I always ran Nova. I thought Nova was really solid. I ran him on a lot of different builds because he has shocking speed. I ran him with Tech Frieza, Tech Beerus, those guys like that. Really solid guy. Now, he gets 3 key and 90% more and 100% buff. Still raises the attack for 3 turns. Still supreme damage. Basically, they buffed this guy to the point where he's going to hit a lot harder because 90% is a really nice buff. 3 key, really good too. And when facing one enemy, that's not a bad thing either. I mean, in most cases, you're going to be fighting one enemy anyway. It means you don't want to take him to the tournament. Fine, because he's not really very useful there. And he won't be useful on, like, the boss stage where you fight, like, 2 or 3 enemies on, like, the first round. It's like the first round, he's not going to be very useful. But after that, he's really self-sufficient because of 3 key and 90%. Really solid unit. And 135 key multiplier. So anyways, that's it for these guys. Like I said, no particular order, just talking about them. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below as far as these units go. They all require the medals from the Dokkan Battlefield, so they're going to require 7 each, so it'll take a while. I have a hope that Dokkan Battlefield will change after beta and become easier to acquire those medals because too many cards need those medals. The Ginyu Force, all of these guys, LR Gohan, too many things need those medals. Unless they honestly want you to play that game, that mode over and over endlessly whenever it stops being a timed thing, because I do suspect that when it's out of beta, they'll allow you to do it more than 3 times a day. But anyways, that's it for me. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video. But until then, stay swaggy. Peace.